Hello there. Welcome back to another FT2H Friday video. I am loving my topic choice for this week because it's kind of a good transition moment to change from highlighting a lot of grief to moving more into the healing journeys. And when I was in probably the very beginning of the healing part of my journey, I ran across this TED Talk given in 2021, and it was given by a scholar named David Kessler. And it was during the pandemic, so it was a or Zoom kind of TED Talk. But he was talking about how he had done some research and worked with Kubler-Ross and had identified that there was a sixth stage to grief. And Kubler-Ross, if you don't know, is very famous for the 5 stages of grief that we know to be denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, and depression. Those are not in order. But of those 5 stages, after you've reached acceptance, which is commonly referred to as the last stage or the 5th stage, then it's kind of what, and there wasn't really a lot talked about what happens after you accept the loss. And so I love the focus that he gives to this 6th stage. He says that the 6th stage of grief is meaning. And he says that meaning isn't us. It is what we find afterwards. And so it's whatever it looks like after you lost somebody or experienced a loss of any kind, to where you get to that point, you have to make a choice. That loss becomes defining. It is the reason for everything you don't do or everything you could do for your life moving forward. And it's really tough to make that choice or to find it. And so when he's talking about meaning, he gives us 7 factors to consider when we're thinking about meaning. And the first one is that it's relative and personal. And I think that this is really important because starting with that idea means that nobody's meaning is going to look the same. My mom found meaning in creating a craft store in our community and running that for almost a year. And that gave her an outlet. It gave her something to focus on. It gave her some kind of purpose to put meaning into her life in a good way right after the loss. My sister got really into plants. She knows how to propagate and loves plants and has this whole obsession with plants. And that gave her meaning. That gave her focus. For me, I didn't find mine right away. It took me about 7 months to find mine. And I found mine in pageants, which is really weird. Because I was thinking about my dad's legacy and I was like, how could I keep this alive? And then I was like, I can run for the official hostess of my university. That's it. That's what I want to do. And the really interesting thing is, I never won a competition I competed in. I was never Miss So-and-so. And I love it. But at the same time, it's what's the purpose of it though? And it really was because it launched my nonprofit and it gave me rooms and conversations to be had and just opened a little bit, some doors to be able to move that forward. And now here we are doing so much more than I ever would have done if it stayed just as a pageant passport. And then, working in pageants and working with coaches, there's just a lot of healing that happened in my experience there that was deeply personal to me. And not everybody gets the same out of it that I did. So it's very relative to me. I love number 2. He says that healing takes time. I know that now. But I remember being frustrated because I was watching my mom and my sister having their own thing, their own passion project, their own, focus. And I was like, I go to work and I go to school and I don't want to do either one of it. This doesn't bring me joy. It doesn't bring me, it feels like an obligation. It feels like adulting. And And so, when we're talking about time, it may take a week, a month, a year, a couple years. But if your intent is to find meaning, you will find it. And it may hit you out of the blue, or it may be something that, small steps became big steps. And before you knew it, it was there. Who knows? Number 3, he says, is that meaning doesn't require understanding. This is really important. We have a lot of individuals in the world who feel like they have to explain why they're doing what they're doing now. And it doesn't necessarily require you explaining anything or understanding it yourself. If something brings you joy, follow it. If something is making the loss a little bit lighter and easier to bear, keep doing it. Be engaged in a good cause and in a good thing. And, who knows, that becomes your passion. That becomes your purpose. That's a calling in your life that you're pursuing that you didn't understand why until it was happening. I think that this is so funny because I experienced this with pageants, not understanding, okay, why do I feel like I should be competing if I'm not winning? Why keep doing it? But I competed until I had that sense of, I'm good, I'm done, and I got that closure of whatever purpose it was meant to serve in my life had been served. And I was like, this is great. I get to cheer on all of my friends from the audience and look at pretty dresses and all of that, but I'm content where I'm at. So I didn't understand it. I still look back and laugh, and I'm like, oh my gosh, God used pageants to get me through this and to heal from a lot of other things that I hadn't healed or processed yet. So number 4, he says that even if you find, or even when you do find meaning, you won't feel like it was worth the cost. Yeah. I mean, there's not a whole lot to be discussed with that. But simply saying that I would trade anything and everything that I'm doing now to have my dad back. And losing him was not worth what I'm doing right now. So if I had to choose, I would, of course, have him back. But it's a good consolation prize. At least if I had to lose him, I'm getting to make something positive out of it and do positive stuff out of it. I like that. That brings me comfort. His 5th factor is your loss is not a test, a lesson, something to be handled, a gift, or a blessing. I agree to disagree with this one. I think a better way to word this is that the loss is not a result of something for you. I went through a phase after I lost my dad where I felt like it had something to do with my behavior. Like if I had only been doing X, Y, and Z better, he wouldn't have died. Or, did he really have to die to teach us this lesson? I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that was wicked thoughts and the adversary playing on my mind when I was vulnerable. I do think that it could be a blessing. And I think that there could be something to gain from a loss. The sheer things that have happened in my family's lives in the last 2.5 years, I have to believe that. Because, things couldn't have happened or wouldn't necessarily have happened the way that they had if he hadn't done it. That was a catalyst for a lot of things. So I find comfort in believing that in some way he knew that in order for me and my mom and my sister to reach our fullest potential and to pursue the calling in our lives, we needed to experience that loss. And he was willing to do that. Maybe I'm wrong, but it brings me comfort. His number 6 factor is only you can find your meaning. And I do think that this is, important enough to reiterate. Um, it's personal. Meaning is not the same for everyone. What it looks like is not the same. It could be this, huge, gigantic, life-altering experience or something very, very small that just makes you be kinder or see the world in a different way. But if it adds value to your life after you lost someone, it's worth it. It is just as significant as if it changed your whole being. Because it's your meaning is your meaning and my meaning is my meaning. I love that. And then his 7th one is meaningful connections can replace these painful memories in time. I love that we're reiterating time here because one of the hardest things about grief is that we expect it to be now. And it's not that. It can't be that. But it can be, slowly but surely, ebb and flow. And you're able to see that as you're progressing in your grief. And you wake up one day and you realize that, you got to meet so-and-so and so-and-so and your best friends or your spouse or, all these people who came into your life while you were grieving and, found you at your lowest have become some of your favorite people. It makes it a little bit easier on the bad days when I can text a friend who understands, who I met after the fact. Or I can think about my sister who is not very vocal about her emotions to me or my mom, talk to her husband about it. There is solace in that. There is meaning in that. And just having those meaningful connections. My sister was engaged to somebody else before my dad passed. And I think losing my dad helped her value what she has to offer and what was important to her and to find it. And it's great. I'm so happy for her. It's what I want, So I love these factors because meaning is kind of a generic word. But looking at it through these lenses and thinking about the possibility of it and kind of using it as a guideline, I think can help. I love what he talked about in the TED Talk about we can't compare grief. If you're familiar with my work, if you're familiar with the channel, you've heard me talk about that we are inclusive of all different kinds of grief. We recognize several and countless different forms of loss. Loss of a pet is no more significant than loss of a person. Loss of a job is no more significant than the loss of a pet, and so on and so on. It is your mental relationship with whatever is lost that defines how significant it is. And so it's unique to each person and to the role that the loss played in their lives. I love the book, The Body Keeps the Score. But I also love the sentiment, the body keeps the score. The mind keeps the score. The mind has no way of knowing what loss it was. It only feels the loss in the absence in your own life. And, he counters this point to say, not only should we not compare our grief to someone else, but that there is room enough for us, for all of our losses. And I think that that's beautiful because stereotypically, if someone's grieving and you feel like their grief is more significant than yours or is more current than yours, then there's that feeling of like, oh, I can't talk about it, or oh, I can't make it about me. But you're not doing that. I mean, there is space for everybody's grief. Everybody can have the opportunity to exist where they're at. I am no less able to feel my own grief than I am to comfort and console those who are grieving something else. That's not how it works. I'm capable to reside in both and exist in both. And I love that because it makes me so much better at my work and doing what I'm doing. I love that he goes on to say, as long as we talk about our loved ones, they never fully die. a lot of meaning can be found in honoring the legacy of someone lost, or keeping their memory alive, or talking about them, because my dad has had an impact on a lot of people he never met because I share his story. And each in person that is impressed by his life or sees him through me has been touched. And so he lives on through them and me and future people I meet, and change and impact that we make. Like, that doesn't stop just because he's no longer physically here to do it himself. I love that. I love the idea that I can keep a piece of my dad alive with me as I move on and do everything that I do. He kind of closes out the video talking about he was asked the question of, if somebody is like in the depths of their grief, what's the one thing they should know? And he says that we all need to remember that no feeling is forever. I think that this is probably the best thing that somebody could hear, especially in the initial stages of grief, because when it first hits you, it feels like it's the end of the world. It feels like it can never be the same. That your life is over, the life as you knew it was over. And those extremes and those absolutes cast a very hopeless and bleak light on our potential. But when you can get to that point where you can acknowledge and say, okay, I'm feeling a little sad right now. You know, grief is a little bit heavier to bear. Let's feel it. If I feel like crying, I cry. If I get angry, I get angry. You know, if I'm laughing, I'm laughing. Like, getting to that point where you acknowledge that because feelings aren't forever, it is possible to feel them and let them play their course and move on and keep moving forward. One of my favorite examples of this is one that I had it was back in February. I have attended a ball held by my school for Mardi Gras for 3 years in a row. And the first time I went with my sister, and we got all dolled up at my mom and my dad's house. And the last photo I have of my dad is with us all dolled up. Year one, didn't think about it. He was still here. Year two, didn't think about it. Avoided every kind of idea of it. Was like really dissociating between knowing what February was and kind of dreading it and not acknowledging it at the same time. And then this year I went and I had a great time. And I was with my friends and I was laughing and dancing and being silly and goofy and all these things. And then I was driving home, listening to one of my favorite songs about my dad. And I remember that thought hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, the last photo I have with my dad is before this ball. And thinking about that, I got so caught up in that feeling and just the weight of it that I had to pull over, have my little cry fest. While I was sitting there, I was like, you know, I think it's important that I share this. It's important that as I'm thinking about all of these fun photos, I am sharing that there was still a sadness component to it. This acknowledging that no feeling is forever allows us to exist in both. I can be grieving and sad and thriving and happy at the same time. Some days I'm happier than sad, and some days I'm sadder than I am happy. There's a song by Lauren Elena that I love that has a lyric that she says that there's going to be a lot of sadness on a lot of happy days. And I love that because you're acknowledging that it's both. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other. You don't have to say, oh, I can't be happy because if I'm happy, then that means I'm no longer sad and I'm no longer grieving. Stop. Please stop. Feel it. Allow yourself to feel it. Communicate that you're feeling it. That is like the best thing because, you know, grief is really hard for people to understand when they're not going through it themselves. But just talking about it, saying, hey, this sucks right now. I think it is the best form of therapy and support that we can give each other. I really do. So the full TED Talk will be linked down below. I highly encourage you to listen to it. I've listened to it several times now, and I'm so grateful that it crossed my mind to talk about today, and be able to transition more into these healing journeys and healing stories. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity that I've had to reminisce on this week and to look back and reflect on where I'm at, and where I've come from and where I have to go, and reevaluating my own meaning. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.